Richard Sterling extends the $50,000 check towards Sophia Rossi, his hand steady, but his eyes betraying a desperation he can't even fathom. "Take it," he says, his voice cold, calculated. The same voice he used to close multi-million-dollar deals, to fire executives without a blink, to build a hotel empire that spans 3 continents. Resign, disappear, and forget you ever met me. But this time, for the first time in 38 years. Richard Sterling is afraid of a 28-year-old maid, wearing a navy uniform stained with bleach, whose brown eyes seem to see something in him that even his $500 an hour therapists have missed. Sophia Rossi stares at the check. $50,000. Enough to pay 3 years' rent on her tenement apartment, the one she shares with her 4-year-old daughter. Enough to buy groceries without having to choose between rice and meat. Enough to take Lily to a private doctor. Instead of waiting 6 hours at the public clinic, her hands tremble, not just from years of cleaning, but from something that's been growing in her chest since the first day she set foot in this 12,000 square foot mansion in Chicago's Gold Coast. Something that makes no sense. Something that scares her more than poverty ever could. She takes the check. Richard breathes a sigh of relief. For a fraction of a second, until Sophia does something no one has ever done to him in his life. She tears the check in half. The sound of the paper ripping echoes in the Carrara marble office, like a gunshot. And then she whispers, tears streaming down her cheap uniform, "I don't want your money, Richard. I want you." The 2 pieces of the check float in the air for an eternal moment. And as they touch the cold marble floor, both of them see it. A medieval town square, a crowd screaming, a man on his knees, his hands chained, a woman in a red embroidered dress running forward, stopped by guards, a sword being raised, and her voice cutting through 8 centuries. "I will find you in every life." Richard slumps back in his $12,000 Italian leather chair, his face ashen, as if he's seen a ghost. Sophia is kneeling on the floor, hands over her chest, her breathing ragged. They have both just witnessed the same impossible thing. But before we understand what just happened in this office, where the air conditioning keeps the temperature at exactly 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and the silence is broken only by the discreet hum of the built-in Bose sound system, we need to go back to 3 weeks ago. Back to the day Sophia Rossi first rang the polished brass doorbell of the Sterling mansion and changed the destiny of 2 souls who've been searching for each other for 800 years. Have you ever felt like you've known someone for far longer than you actually have? Have you ever looked into the eyes of a stranger and felt a chill you can't explain, a familiarity that defies logic? A sense that that person carries something of yours that was lost so long ago you don't even remember when. Maybe you dismissed it as imagination. Maybe you laughed it off. But what you're about to hear will make you question everything you believe about time, destiny, and the nature of connections that span lifetimes. It was October 3rd, a typical Monday in Chicago, when Sophia Rossi woke up at 5 a.m. in her 1.5-room tenement apartment on Skid Row. Lily was still asleep on the thin mattress they shared. Her brown hair spread across the pillowcaseless pillow, her breath soft, the breath of someone who hasn't yet learned the worries of the adult world. Sophia watched her for a moment, etching that angel face into her memory. Because today was her first day at the Sterling's house, and she didn't know if she could keep the job. She'd already lost 4 jobs in 6 months, not because of incompetence, but because the bosses always wanted the same thing. And Sophia always refused. She may be poor, she may desperately need the money, but there are things no amount of money can buy. She left Lily with Mrs. Rodriguez, a 70-year-old neighbor who cared for 5 children from Skid Row for $20 a day. and enough love to make up for the lack of resources. She took 2 buses, a 1-hour and 40-minute journey, from the extreme poverty of the South Side to the obscene wealth of Chicago's Gold Coast, where houses have more bathrooms than Skid Row has families. She got off at the stop in front of the gated community. She showed her ID at the gatehouse. The security guard looked her up and down with that contempt disguised as procedure. She knew that look well. It's the same one she gets everywhere. The look that says, "You don't belong here." The Sterling Mansion was the 5th house on the block, a modern, 3-story palace with a mirrored glass facade and gardens that looked like they were ripped from a European magazine. Sophia rang the doorbell at 7 a.m. sharp, as instructed by the agency. The door was opened by a woman in her late 50s, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing an impeccable grey suit. Agnes, the head housekeeper. She didn't smile. "You're the new one. We'll see how long you last. Come in." The interior of the house was even more intimidating than the exterior. Marble floors that reflected like mirrors, a double staircase with wrought iron railings, a baccarat crystal chandelier that cost more than Sophia would earn in 10 lifetimes, works of art on the walls that she didn't recognize, but that clearly were worth fortunes, and a silence, a deep, heavy silence, as if the house were a luxurious mausoleum where life had forgotten to enter. Agnes led Sophia on a quick, cold tour. Living room that no one uses, dining room that receives guests once a month, industrial kitchen with state-of-the-art German appliances, laundry room bigger than Sophia's apartment, 6 bathrooms, 8 bedrooms, private gym, movie theater, heated pool in the garden, and finally, Mr. Sterling's office on the 2nd floor. You don't enter there without authorization. You don't touch anything there. You don't look at him unless he speaks to you. Understand? Sophia nodded. She had worked in rich houses before. She knew the unwritten rules. A maid is invisible. A maid has no opinion. A maid smiles, does the work, and leaves. But when Agnes opened the office door, just to show where it was, just for 3 seconds before closing it again, Sophia felt something strange, a dizziness, a tightness in her chest, as if that place, that room she had never seen before, carried a memory that wasn't hers, or maybe it was, from a time so distant that it shouldn't be possible to remember. Richard Sterling wasn't home that first morning. He was in São Paulo, closing the acquisition of a chain of boutique hotels. Sophia worked alone, cleaning bathrooms that were spotless, polishing floors that already gleamed, arranging crystal and porcelain ornaments with meticulous care. Lily watched her like a hawk, pointing out every minor imperfection, every smudge on a glass, every cushion that wasn't perfectly aligned. But Sophia endured, because Lily needed milk, because the rent was due in 5 days, because there was no choice. At the end of the day, as she stored the cleaning supplies in the laundry room closet, Sophia noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. On the back hallway wall, between the kitchen and the laundry room, was a row of framed and antique photographs, family photos, generations of Sterlings, and in one of them, a faded sepia photograph that looked over a century old, was a young man with a mustache and an old-fashioned suit. The face was different, the era was different, but the eyes were unmistakable. She knew those eyes. From where? From when? Why? Lily appeared behind her like a silent ghost. That's a photo of Randolph Sterling, the family's founder. 1875. A spice merchant who made a fortune importing cinnamon and pepper from India. He died young, 39 years old, never married. They say he lost his great love and never recovered. Now stop looking at things that are none of your business and go home. Be back tomorrow at 7. Sophia left the mansion at 6 in the evening, took the 2 buses back, picked up Lily from Mrs. Rodriguez's house, prepared a simple dinner of rice and eggs, bathed her daughter using cold water because the electric heater had broken, put Lily to bed, and stayed awake until midnight trying to understand why she couldn't get those eyes from that old photograph out of her head. Why did she feel like she knew that man? Why did her heart race when she thought about him? She didn't believe in reincarnation, didn't believe in destiny, didn't believe in soulmates. Sophia Rossi believed in hard work, bills to pay, and survival. But something inside her, something she couldn't name, was beginning to awaken. It was on Tuesday, her second day of work, that Sophia Rossi and Richard Sterling met for the first time. He arrived at 8:30 in the morning, driving a black Porsche Panamera that cost the equivalent of 50 years of her salary. He entered through the garage, went straight up to his office, and closed the door. Sophia was cleaning the hall mirror on the ground floor when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. She didn't see him, but she felt him. Felt the presence of someone in the house, someone who changed the air, someone who carried weight. Lily gave the instructions. Mr. Sterling is home today. Work in silence. Don't interrupt. Don't ask questions. At 10:30, you'll bring coffee to the office. Knock 3 times. Enter only if he says so. Leave the tray on the side table. Don't look him in the eyes. Don't speak unless he asks you something. At 10:30 sharp, Sophia prepared the tray as Lily had demonstrated. Double espresso in an Hermes porcelain cup. 2 imported almond biscotti on a silver saucer. Glass of San Pellegrino mineral water. Starched white linen napkin folded in a perfect triangle. Her hands trembled as she carried the tray upstairs. Not because of nervousness about serving a wealthy employer, but because of something she couldn't name. A premonition, a fear, or perhaps an expectation that made no sense at all. She knocked 3 times on the office door. Enter. The voice was deep, masculine, tired. Sophia opened the door and stepped inside. Richard Sterling was sitting behind a mahogany desk that looked like it had been carved from a century-old tree. He wore a white dress shirt with rolled-up sleeves, a loosened tie, black hair lightly graying at the temples, 2 days' worth of stubble, dark brown eyes fixed on the screen of a laptop. He didn't look up when Sophia entered. Just leave it there. She walked silently across the Persian rug towards the side table, placed the tray, and turned to leave. And then Richard looked up. Time stopped. It's not a literary expression. It's not dramatic exaggeration. Time literally seemed to stop. Richard raised his eyes from the laptop screen and met Sophia's gaze. And the air left his lungs as if he'd been punched in the stomach. He went pale, rose from his chair so abruptly that it fell backwards with a crash. Sophia dropped the linen napkin she was still holding. Both stood paralyzed, 10 feet apart. A modern office in Chicago. 2 complete strangers. But the eyes recognized each other. Richard broke the silence first, his voice hoarse. Who are you? Sophia felt the words come out before she could process them. I know you. Impossible. It's the first day I've been home since you started. I know. But I know you. From somewhere, from some time. Richard ran a hand through his hair. a gesture of frustration he'd made since childhood when something destabilized him. "This makes no sense. Leave, please, leave." Sophia left, but her legs trembled so badly that she had to lean against the hallway wall. On the other side of the door, Richard Sterling sat on the office floor, his back against the mahogany desk, his heart pounding so hard he thought he was having a heart attack. He didn't believe in love at first sight, didn't believe in mystical connections. Richard Sterling built an empire with logic, numbers, strategy. But something had just happened in that office that defied all logic. He had looked into the eyes of that maid in the Navy uniform and felt like he had found something he'd been searching for his entire life, without even knowing he was looking. During the rest of that Tuesday, Richard avoided leaving his office, asked Lily to bring him lunch, worked until 8 in the evening, skipped dinner, listened as Sophia's footsteps descended the stairs at 6 in the afternoon, waited for the sound of the front door closing. Only then did he go downstairs. He found Lily in the kitchen preparing chamomile tea. He had never talked about maids with Lily before. She managed the house. He didn't get involved, but this time he asked, trying to sound casual. "The new one. What's her name?" Lily looked at him with barely disguised surprise. Sophia Rossi, 28 years old, single mother, a 4-year-old daughter, lives in Skid Row, came through the agency, clean references. Why? Just curiosity. And then, because he couldn't stop himself, is she married? Single. The child's father abandoned them both when the girl was born. Why the interest? No interest. Just making sure the house is in order. Good night. Lily. He went up to the master suite on the 3rd floor. A sprawling, sun-drenched space overlooking Lake Michigan, complete with a jacuzzi and a walk-in closet bigger than most studio apartments in the city. He took a cold shower. He tried to sleep. At 2 in the morning, he was still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake those hazel eyes from his mind. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep altogether, walked down to his study, opened his laptop, and did something he'd never done before. He typed into the search bar, "Why do you feel like you know someone you just met?" The results were all garbage. Soulmates, past lives, karmic connections, New Age mumbo-jumbo for weak people who needed to invent magic to cope with reality. Richard slammed the laptop shut. He wasn't a weak person. He didn't need magic. He needed control. And for the first time in 38 years, Richard Sterling was losing control. When Sophia arrived on Wednesday, Richard was prepared. He'd slept 2 hours, downed 3 shots of espresso, repeated to himself 50 times, "She's just the cleaning lady." You're tired. You're stressed. You imagined the intensity of the moment. It means nothing. He stayed locked in his study the entire morning. At 10:30, he heard a knock at the door. 3 taps. "Come in." Sophia opened the door, carried the coffee tray to the side table, and this time, she didn't look at him. She set down the coffee, turned, and left. Richard hated it. Hated that she hadn't looked at him. Hated the relief he felt. Hated the disappointment that followed. He picked up the coffee cup, brought it to his lips, and realized that her hand had touched that same cup just minutes before. He set the cup back down, unable to drink. This is insane. You're losing it, Richard. You need a vacation. You need a psychiatrist. You need to forget about the hazel eyes of that woman who's turning your mind inside out. On Thursday, Sophia was polishing the marble floor in the foyer when Richard came downstairs for lunch. He needed to get out of his study before he completely cracked. He walked past her without saying a word, but on the last step of the grand staircase, he tripped. It wasn't typical of him. Richard Sterling didn't trip, but he tripped. And Sophia, who was 10 feet away, dropped her cleaning cloth and rushed to steady him. Pure instinct. Her hand touched his arm, and then it happened. For the first time, a flash, an image too quick to fully process. A town square, ancient cobblestones, blazing sun, people shouting, and an overwhelming sense of loss, of injustice, of something terribly wrong. Richard recoiled as if he'd been electrocuted. "Don't touch me!" Sophia stepped back, startled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I just wanted to help." "I don't need your help. Get back to work." But Richard's hands were shaking, and Sophia noticed. She always noticed things that no one else did, like the loneliness in his eyes, like the tension in his shoulders, like the fact that a man with a multi-million-dollar mansion lived completely alone. No family, no friends, no love. He had everything, and he had nothing, just like she had nothing. But she had Lily, and that was everything. On Friday, 1 week after Sophia had started working at the Sterling mansion, Richard made a decision. He needed to resolve this. He needed to regain control. So he did what he always did when something bothered him. He tried to buy the solution. He summoned Sophia to his study. Eleanor, his longtime assistant, looked at him with surprise, but didn't question it. When Sophia entered the study at 4 in the afternoon, Richard was standing by his desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed, the posture of a man accustomed to negotiating and winning. "Sophia, is it?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling. You have a daughter." "I do. Lily, 4 years old." "It must be difficult, supporting a child on a housekeeper's salary." "Yes, Mr. Sterling. I want to offer you something, a bonus, $200 extra per week." Sophia blinked, confused. "Why?" "Because you work well, because I want to ensure you stay." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling, but I don't need a bonus. I just need to work with dignity and receive the fair wage we agreed upon." Richard hadn't expected that response. No one refused his money. No one. $200 extra can make a difference in your daughter's life. Better school, better clothes, better food. Why refuse? And it was in that moment, that Friday at 4:07 in the afternoon, that Sophia said the thing that would change everything. "Because, Mr. Sterling, I don't need your pity. I don't need your extra money. I need respect. Respect for my work. Respect for my effort. I'm not a charity case. I'm a professional. And if you're offering extra money, it's because you want something. And whatever it is, the answer is no." Richard was speechless. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Ever. And part of him was furious. But another part, a part he didn't want to admit, was impressed. "You may leave," he whispered. Sophia left, and Richard remained alone in his study, gazing out the glass window at the perfectly manicured garden, at the pool he never used, at the luxurious life that felt increasingly like a gilded cage. Why did that woman irritate him so much? Why did she affect him in a way that no one else could? Why, for the first time in years, was he feeling something beyond the mechanical emptiness of wake, work, sleep, repeat? That night, Richard dreamed. It wasn't an ordinary dream. It was too vivid, too real. He was in a town square paved with ancient stones. Scorching sun, the smell of horses and manure and fear. He had heavy iron chains on his wrists, people all around shouting, "Traitor! Thief! Death!" And then he saw her, a woman in an embroidered red dress running towards him, guards holding her back. She screaming, "No, please, no!" Her face, her eyes. It was Sophia, but it wasn't. It was another time, another world, another life. And then the sword fell. Richard woke up at 3 in the morning, soaked in sweat, heart racing, screaming. It took him 10 minutes to realize where he was, in his bedroom, in his time, alive. It was just a nightmare, but it didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like a memory. On Saturday, Sophia didn't come to work. Sunday, the mansion was empty, just Eleanor and the gardener. Richard wandered through the house like a ghost, unable to work, unable to relax, unable to think of anything besides that hazel-eyed housekeeper who had refused his money and turned his life upside down in just 1 week. And then, on Monday, October 12th, the moment arrived that would change everything. Sophia arrived at 7 in the morning as usual. Richard had been in his study since 6, unable to sleep. She came upstairs with the coffee at 10:30, knocked 3 times. "Come in." She entered, placed the tray, turned to leave. And then Richard did something impulsive. Something he never did. He spoke without thinking. "Wait." Sophia stopped, turned. "Please, sit down." "Sir?" "Sit down. Please, I need to talk to you." Sophia hesitated. Sitting down would be breaking the employer-employee barrier. Sitting down was dangerous. But something in his voice, something in the way he was looking at her, made her sit in the leather armchair across from his desk. Richard sat down too, his fingers interlaced, his expression that of a man about to confess something he doesn't understand. "I had a dream about you." "No, it wasn't about you. It was about someone who looked like you. In another place. Another time. There was a town square. People shouting. I was dying. And you were there, shouting, trying to save me. Does any of this make sense to you?" Sophia went pale. Her fingers gripped the arms of the armchair. "I've had a dream too. 3 nights ago. I was in an old room, made of stone, cold. I couldn't eat. I couldn't live. Because someone had died. Someone I loved. And that person was you, or looked like you. And I made a promise. I said I would find you. In every life." The silence that followed was deafening. 2 strangers, separated by a mahogany desk and by all the social distance that exists between a millionaire and a struggling housekeeper, had just admitted something impossible. Something that defied logic, science, reality. But that seemed more real than anything they had both ever felt. Richard was the first to crack. "This is insane. I don't believe in this stuff. Past lives, reincarnation, destiny. It doesn't exist. I don't either." But then, How do we explain this? We can't. And then Richard did the thing that would make the situation worse. Or better. Depending on your perspective. He got up from his chair, walked around the desk, stopped in front of Sophia, and extended his hand. "Give me your hand." "Why?" "Just give it to me. Please." Sophia extended her right hand. Richard took it. And the moment their palms touched, skin against skin, heat against heat, scar against callus, they both saw it. It wasn't a flash this time. It was a full vision. They were in the town square, Tertus 25. He was in chains. She was shouting. The promise, the death, and then the pain. A pain that crossed 800 years and hit them there, in that modern office in Chicago, with enough force to knock them both to their knees. When the vision passed, Richard and Sophia were on the floor of the office, hands still intertwined, tears streaming down both their faces. Richard whispered with a broken voice, "What's happening to us?" Sophia looked into his eyes, and for the first time she was absolutely sure of something that should be impossible. "I kept my promise. I found you, even if it took 800 years. And then she noticed something. When Richard had taken her hand, the sleeve of her uniform had ridden up. And on Sophia's right wrist, there was a mark. A birthmark that she'd had for as long as she could remember. A mark in the exact shape of a chain, as if at some point in some life she had been chained. And Richard saw it too. His fingers trembling, he touched the mark. And the moment he touched it, they both heard it. A distant voice, echoing through time. "I will find you in every life, even if you have nothing to offer me." This is the point where most people would say, this is impossible. Coincidence? Imagination? But what if you've felt this? What if you've looked into someone's eyes and felt 800 years of recognition? What if there are connections that can't be explained by science, by logic, by reason? What if some souls really do seek each other out through lifetimes, through centuries, until they finally find each other again? If you're feeling chills right now, if something inside you is saying, yes, this is real, this exists, leave a super thanks. Because stories like this need to be told. Truths like this need to be heard. And what's about to happen between Richard and Sophia is going to make you question everything you think you know about love, destiny, and the power of a promise made 800 years ago. But recognizing the truth and accepting it are two completely different things. And for the next 5 days, Richard Sterling would do everything in his power to deny the impossible that had just happened on the floor of his office. The following Tuesday, Richard wasn't home. He took a flight to Miami at 6 in the morning without telling Lily. Urgent meetings, unavoidable negotiations, problems that required his immediate presence. All lies. The truth is, he needed distance. He needed space to breathe, to think, to convince himself that all of that had been a collective hallucination caused by stress and lack of sleep. Rational people don't have visions of past lives. Successful people don't fall to their knees crying over housekeepers. Richard Sterling was not a weak person, and feeling what he was feeling was unacceptable weakness. He stayed in Miami for 3 days. He closed a $15 million deal. He went out to dinner with investors. He tried to call a model ex-girlfriend who always answered his calls. He hung up before completing the call because every woman he saw had something wrong. Eyes the wrong color, voice the wrong tone, presence completely wrong. None of them were Sophia, and that terrified him. How had a 28-year-old housekeeper from Skid Row become the standard by which he now measured all other women? How had that happened in just 2 weeks? Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Sophia continued to go to the Sterling mansion every day. Lily informed her that Mr. Sterling had traveled. He would return on Friday. Sophia nodded and continued cleaning, but her hands trembled as she held the cleaning supplies. She was also trying to deny it, trying to convince herself that all of that had been stress, tiredness, the fertile imagination of a desperate woman who invented a connection where there was nothing but employer and employee. But then she would go into the office to clean, and the smell of the room, the weight of the air, the feeling of proximity to something profoundly important. All of that screamed a truth she didn't want to hear. On Wednesday night, Lily had a crisis. She started coughing up blood. Sophia rushed her to the public hospital. 6 hours of waiting. Lily with a fever of 102 on her lap. No doctors available, no vacant beds, no hope. And there, sitting in that cold hospital corridor at 3 in the morning, holding her daughter who was burning with fever, Sophia did something she swore she would never do. She took out her old cell phone with the cracked screen, found the number that Lily had given her for house emergencies, and called. Richard answered on the 3rd ring, his voice sleepy, annoyed. "Who is this?" "Mr. Sterling, it's Sophia. My daughter is sick. I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone to ask for help. I know I shouldn't call, but..." "Which hospital?" "Fernandez Public Hospital. West Side. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief. He was in Miami. How could he possibly be here in 30 minutes, but exactly 28 minutes later? Richard Sterling walked through the hallway of that run-down public hospital with peeling paint and dirty floors, wearing a $3,000 Hugo Boss suit that was completely out of place in that environment of poverty and sickness, radiating a presence that made doctors stop and stare. He found Sophia huddled in the corner of the hallway. He saw Lily burning with fever in her arms, and something inside him just broke. Within 15 minutes, Lily was in a private room, a specialist pediatrician examining her, state-of-the-art antibiotics being administered, air conditioning blasting, a clean pillow, a warm blanket. Sophia watched it all, unable to process what was happening. How had he managed all of this? "Money," Richard whispered beside her. "Money buys doctors, money buys beds, money saves lives." But his voice held no triumph, only bitterness, as if he knew that being right about the power of money only made him feel even more empty. It was 5 in the morning when the doctor came out of the room and announced that Lily was stable. Bacterial pneumonia, serious, but treatable. She would need to stay hospitalized for 3 days. Sophia burst into tears. Tears of relief, of exhaustion, of gratitude. Richard stood there, frozen beside her, unsure what to do. He wasn't good with emotions. He never had been. But then Sophia did something unexpected. She turned and hugged him. A desperate hug from a mother who had almost lost her child and had been saved by someone who shouldn't have cared. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Richard remained paralyzed for 3 seconds. And then his arms closed around her, and the moment he hugged her, he felt it, that sense of completeness, of fitting together, of finally having arrived home after wandering lost for 800 years. His eyes closed. He inhaled the scent of her hair, cheap drugstore shampoo, hospital sweat, a mother's fear. And yet, it was the most beautiful perfume he had ever smelled in his life, because it was her, because she was... He pulled away abruptly. You should rest. I'll have Mercedes bring you clean clothes, food, whatever you need, but I have to go. Richard didn't leave. He stayed at the hospital all day, working from the hallway using his laptop, attending video conferences with headphones, ordering delivery food for Sophia because she refused to leave Lily alone even to go to the cafeteria. And with each passing hour, each time he glanced through the window of the room and saw Sophia caring for her daughter, with love so pure it hurt to watch, he felt the defenses he had built over 38 years begin to crack. Late in the afternoon, Lily woke up. She saw the man in the suit in the hallway, and with that inexplicable clarity that small children sometimes have, she said, "Mommy, it's him, the sad man who finally found you." Richard heard through the half-open door. Sophia heard. They both pretended they hadn't heard, but they had. And they could no longer deny that something much bigger than both of them was happening, something that children could see, but adults were desperately trying to ignore. On Friday, Lily was discharged. Richard sent a driver to pick up Sophia and her daughter. He took them back to Skid Row. He saw for the first time the tenement apartment where Sophia lived. 1.5 rooms, plywood walls, a tin roof, cold cement floor, a thin mattress on the floor, a 2-burner stove, a shared bathroom with 6 families. And as he stood there, in the doorway of that place that wasn't even 1/10 the size of his closet, Richard Sterling felt shame for the first time in his life. Shame of his own wealth. Shame for having spent $12,000 on an office chair, when there were people like Sophia raising children in places like this. Shame for never having looked, for never having seen, for having lived 38 years completely blind to the reality of 90% of humanity. He offered money. He offered an apartment. He offered to pay for private school for Lily. Sophia refused everything. "Why?" he shouted, frustrated. "Why do you refuse everything I offer?" "Because if I accept," Sophia whispered, "you'll think you bought me, and I can't be bought, Richard. Not for 50,000, not for 500,000, not for all your fortune. Because what I feel for you is priceless. And if I accept your money, it will taint that. It will turn into a transaction. What should be?" She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. But Richard knew how it would end. Love, the word that neither of them dared to say. What would you have done in their place? Would you accept the money and solve the practical problems? Or would you refuse to preserve something more important that cannot be bought? Comment down below, because that choice that Sophia made at that moment would change absolutely everything that was to come. On Saturday, Richard couldn't stay away. He showed up in Skid Row at 10 in the morning with a car full of food, medicine, toys for Lily. Sophia let him in. They sat on the thin mattress because there were no chairs. They drank tea from old mugs. Lily played with a donated doll that Sophia had sewn from scraps. And there, in that tenement apartment, that was the opposite of everything Richard knew. He felt something he had never felt in the $1 million mansion. He felt peace. "Tell me about 1225, Sophia asked suddenly. "What did you see when we touched hands?" Richard closed his eyes. "I saw a town square in Castile, Toledo, I think. I was a merchant, poor. I sold spices. I met you in a market. You were noble, a count's daughter. We shouldn't have even talked, but we talked. And we fell in love. And when your father found out, he accused me of treason, theft, any crime that would justify my execution. And you were forced to watch. I saw your face in the crowd as the sword came down, and the last thing I heard was you shouting that promise. I will find you in every life, Sophia whispered, even if you have nothing to offer me. Why did you say that? Because they were marrying me off to a wealthy duke. They wanted me to choose fortune, power, title, and I chose you, a poor merchant, because what we felt had nothing to do with money. It had to do with souls that recognized each other. And when you died, I refused to eat. I refused to live without you. I died 3 months later, and I made a promise that I would take as many lifetimes as necessary. I will find you. And when I find you, it won't matter if you are rich or poor, because I will love you the same way. Richard opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. But now it's reversed. Now I'm the rich one, and you're the poor one. And I'm offering everything, and you refuse, because you still don't understand, Richard. I don't need your fortune. I need you, the man who waited 800 years, the man whose soul I recognize. It's about the man who answered his phone at 3 in the morning when my daughter needed him and didn't ask how much it would cost to save her. That man is who I want. The rest is just noise. They fell silent, Lily humming softly as she played. The clamor of Skid Row seeped in from outside. Kids yelling, motorcycles roaring past, loud music blaring from some neighbor's apartment, life throbbing in a raw, real way, with no luxury filters to hide reality. And there, for the first time, Richard began to accept it. Accept that this wasn't madness, it wasn't coincidence, it was something real that had been chasing him through the centuries and had finally, impossibly, been found. On Sunday, Richard didn't show. Sophia figured he'd given up, that he'd gone back to the mansion, and to the reality of a rich man who doesn't mix with maids from Skid Row. She tried not to cry, tried not to feel the pain of loss, but it hurt. It hurt as if she'd lost him for the second time, and 800 years between one loss and another hadn't been enough to lessen the pain. And then, Monday morning, Sophia arrived at the mansion at 7, as always. Mercedes greeted her with a strange look. "Mr. Sterling asked you to go straight to the basement when you get here." "The basement?" "Yes, he's been down there since 5 this morning, looking for something." Sophia descended the narrow staircase. That led to the mansion's basement. An enormous storage space, boxes stacked high, antique furniture covered with sheets, generations of Sterlings accumulated down there. And in the center of it all, Richard, kneeling on the concrete floor, dress shirt covered in dust, hair a mess, eyes red from lack of sleep, and around him, dozens of open boxes, old documents scattered, old photographs, objects that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. "Richard, what are you doing?" He looked up, an expression of a man possessed. "I need proof, real proof. Not just visions, not just feelings, physical proof that 1225 really happened, that you and I really existed, that we're not crazy. And did you find something?" Richard held out his hand. He was holding something rusty, made of metal, heavy, ancient. Sophia approached, and when she saw what he was holding, the air rushed from her lungs. It was a chain, a medieval iron chain, rusted with age and engraved on the central link, almost illegible but still visible. Rodrigo Sterling, traitor, 1225. How is that possible? Sophia whispered. My family keeps historical objects. For generations, I always thought Rodrigo Sterling was my great-great-grandfather from the 19th century. But when I researched, I found older records, documents from 1225. A merchant executed for treason. Same family, same name, and this chain was in a box, dated 1225. Sophia looked at her own wrist, at the birthmark in the shape of a chain. Richard placed the iron chain over her birthmark. A perfect fit, the exact shape, the exact width, as if that specific chain had marked her skin in another life. And the mark had traveled 800 years. To get here, they both stared, speechless, because words couldn't describe the impossible. That was happening in the dusty basement of a mansion in Chicago, an object from 1225, a birthmark from 2025, and both fitting perfectly. Physical proof, real proof, proof that they could no longer deny. Some people are going to pause here. They're going to need a moment to process the impossible, because we're used to living in a world of logic, science, rational explanations. But what happens when physical proof meets the unexplainable? What happens when an 800-year-old chain fits perfectly on the birthmark of a woman who shouldn't have any connection to that object? If you're feeling like you need to support stories like this, that need to be told, even if they challenge everything we think we know, leave a super thanks, because what's coming now is going to require you to open your mind to possibilities you may never have considered before. Richard took Sophia's hand, still holding the chain against her mark. We need to know more. I need to understand what really happened in 1225. The visions are fragmented, too fast, but there must be documents, historical records, something that explains who we were, what we did, why I was executed. Sophia looked into his eyes. Do you really want to know? Sometimes the past carries pains that should stay buried. I need to know, because if I'm going to accept that this is real, and that you and I lived before, that we died and came back, I need to understand the whole truth, not just fragments, the whole story. And so it was that, on that Monday in October, Richard Sterling and Sophia Rossi began a search. That would take them through historical archives, dusty museums, and old libraries in Toledo, Spain. Richard used all his fortune and influence, paid historians, hired researchers, opened doors that would normally remain closed to ordinary people, and 3 days later, he found it in the Municipal Archive of Toledo. In a restricted section that housed rare medieval documents, there was a parchment from 1225, written in old Castilian Spanish, faded ink, brittle paper. But the words were still legible, and what was written would change everything. Richard photographed the document, had it translated by a specialist in medieval Castilian Spanish, and on Thursday night, he returned to Chicago. He went straight to Skid Row, found Sophia putting Lily to bed. She saw him through the window, her heart racing. He came in, holding an envelope. His expression was that of someone who had seen a ghost. I found it. Sophia just looked at him. Richard opened the envelope, took out printed sheets, the translation of the document. He began to read aloud, his voice trembling. Official record of the Toledo Court, year of our Lord 1225, Rodrigo Sterling, spice merchant, accused of treason against the Crown of Castile, sentenced to public execution by beheading. Crime committed, illicit courtship of Lady Beatrice de Mendoza, daughter of Lord Alfonso de Mendoza, Count of Orgaz, betrothed in marriage to the Duke of Toledo. Rodrigo Sterling confessed to loving Lady Beatrice, refused to deny it, was executed in the main town square. At 9 o'clock in the morning of the 15th of March, Lady Beatrice was present, restrained by the Duke's guards after the execution. Lady Beatrice was taken to the Duke's castle. Forced marriage occurred 3 days later. Lady Beatrice refused to consummate the marriage, refused to eat, refused to drink, died of starvation. 67 days after the execution of Rodrigo Sterling, last words recorded, "I will find you in every life, even if you have nothing to offer me." The silence after that reading was absolute. Sophia had tears streaming down her face. Richard could barely hold the sheets, his hands trembling so much. Lily slept soundly on the mattress, oblivious to the weight of those words, words that proved the impossible, official document, historical record, exact names, exact date, exact promise, everything matching perfectly with the visions they'd both experienced. 67 days, Sophia whispered. I survived 67 days without you. And then I gave up. Richard knelt before her, the papers fluttering to the floor. You kept your promise. 800 years later, you found me. And here we are, rich and poor, reversed, but the same connection, the same souls. And then Sophia did something she hadn't planned to do, something that spilled out before she could stop herself. She touched his face and whispered in a language she didn't know she spoke. Mi señor Rodrigo, te esperé 800 años y te encontré. Richard froze. You're speaking Old Castilian. You don't speak Spanish. You barely speak English correctly. How? I don't know, Sophia stammered. The words just came out. I don't understand what I'm saying, but at the same time, I understand it perfectly. And then Richard responded, also in a language he shouldn't know. Mi señora Beatriz, regresé a ti, como prometí en mi último suspiro. They both stared, in shock, looking at each other, speaking a language neither of them had studied, a language that barely existed anymore, medieval Castilian, from the 13th century, and the words flowed naturally, as if 800 years hadn't passed, as if that dialogue had only been interrupted by a sword, and could finally, impossibly, be resumed. Sophia continued in Old Castilian, tears streaming down her face. Morí por ti. Me negué a vivir en un mundo que no te tenía. The Duke forced me to marry, but I was never his. It was always you, in every thought, in every breath, until I stopped breathing. Richard cupped her face in both hands, his voice breaking. Yo te vi morir. I saw the sword fall. I saw your eyes, and the last thing I thought was, I will find you. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will find you, even if I have to cross 1,000 lifetimes. And it was in that moment, in that Skid Row tenement apartment, where the corrugated iron roof let in the sounds of the night, and the winter chill seeped through the cracks in the plywood walls, that Richard and Sophia stopped resisting, stopped denying, stopped being afraid of the impossible. They kissed, and the moment their lips met, they both saw everything. It wasn't fragments this time, it was the whole story. They saw 12 and 25, they saw the market where they met. She was buying spices, he was selling them. The look that changed everything, the secret conversations, the forbidden meetings, the love that grew, despite the social classes, separating them like an impassable abyss. They saw the day. They were discovered, the count, Furious, the false accusation, the unjust trial, the death sentence, they saw the morning of the execution. Rodrigo being led to the town square, Beatrice trying to run to him, held back by 6 guards, Rodrigo on his knees, chains on his wrists, the same chains that were now there in the basement of the Sterling mansion. 800 years later, they saw the final moment, the sword being raised, his eyes searching for her in the crowd, finding her, and that look saying everything that words couldn't. I love you. I will always love you. I will find you again. They saw the sword fall. They saw Beatrice scream. They saw her being dragged away. They saw the forced marriage. 3 days later, Beatrice in a white wedding dress, her face expressionless, her soul dead. They saw her refusing food, day after day. The Duke furious. The servants worried, the priest trying to convince her, but she only whispered, "Te encontraré en cada vida, Rodrigo, even if you have nothing to offer me." They saw day 67, Beatrice in bed, her body frail as paper, shallow breaths, and with her last breath, a smile. Because she knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the interval between one encounter and another, and even if it took centuries, she would find him again. When the vision ended, Richard and Sophia were lying on the thin mattress of the tenement, embracing, crying, not tears of sadness, tears of liberation, of finally understanding, of finally knowing that they weren't crazy, that all of this was real. That 800 years ago, they had loved each other so much that not even death could separate their souls, and now, finally, they were together again. "What did you ask me to bring?" Sophia whispered. "Beatrice." "No, Sophia." She corrected herself, confused, still not completely back in the present. "Spices," Richard replied, also lost between 1225 and 2025. "Cinnamon, pepper, saffron. You said you wanted to make a perfume for your mother. I brought the best I had. I didn't charge you. You got angry. Said you wouldn't accept charity. I said it wasn't charity. It was a gift from a man who couldn't forget the woman since the first look. And I told you it was impossible, that I was promised to a duke, that you were a merchant, that we could never be together. And you," I said that impossible, was just another word for something that hasn't happened yet. That if the soul recognizes the soul, social class is just an irrelevant detail, invented by men who are afraid of losing control. And you laughed. It was the first time. I saw you laugh. And at that moment, I knew that I would love you beyond death. And you were right. You loved me beyond death. 800 years beyond. They lay embraced in silence. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who finally understood everything, understood why Sophia had refused the money, why Richard couldn't get her out of his head, why Lily called him a sad man, who had finally found who he was looking for. They understood that this wasn't a beginning. It was a continuation, a book that had been brutally closed in the middle of the story in 1225, and now, finally, could continue to the ending they never had. But understanding and accepting publicly are two very different things. And on Friday, when Richard arrived at the law firm that managed his businesses, when he told his lawyer that he wanted to do something unprecedented, the reaction was one of complete incredulity. "You want what?" The lawyer, A 60-year-old man who had worked with the Sterling family for 3 decades looked at Richard as if he'd gone mad. You want to transfer half of your assets to a cleaning lady you met a month ago. She's not a cleaning lady. She's... Richard paused. How to explain? She's someone very important. Someone I need to protect. Richard, you have 300 million in assets. Real estate, hotels, investments. You're asking me to transfer 150 million to a woman who lives in Skid Row, a woman you barely know. This is insane. If you want to give her money, give her a house, an apartment, a modest investment fund, but half of your fortune. You're delusional. I'm not delirious. I'm finally seeing that fortune means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Seeing that I've spent 38 years accumulating money because I was trying to fill a void that money can't fill. Seeing that Sophia is the only real thing I've ever had in my life. And if something happens to me, I need to know she's protected. Richard, you're in love. Passion passes. In 6 months, you'll look back and thank me for stopping you from making this mistake. And then, Richard did something that surprised even himself. He stood up from his chair, looked the lawyer in the eyes, and said in a firm voice, "You're fired. I'll find a lawyer who respects my decisions. Good day." He walked out, called a competing firm, scheduled a meeting for Monday, and as he drove back to his mansion, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom to finally make choices that didn't make logical sense, but made perfect sense to his soul. Freedom to finally live instead of just accumulate. Freedom to finally love without fear of appearing weak. But fortune brings problems that the less fortunate don't have to face. And that same Friday afternoon, Abigail approached Richard in his office. Her expression showed extreme discomfort. "Mr. Sterling, I need to talk to you. It's about Sophia." Richard looked up from his laptop, immediately tense. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. But some of the other staff are talking about the way you treat her, differently from the others, about you going to the hospital when her daughter was sick, about you spending time in that place where she lives. People are talking. Let them talk. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, you need to understand. Sophia is a vulnerable woman, a single mother. Dying from Skid Row, if people start thinking she's taking advantage of you, that she's trying to seduce you for money, it could destroy her reputation. And yours." Richard stood up, his fury growing. "Sophia isn't taking advantage of anything. If anyone's trying something here, it's me. I'm the one who can't stay away from her. I'm the one who wants to protect her. I'm the one who..." "You're in love," Abigail said softly. "And passion is beautiful, Mr. Sterling. But the world out there won't see it that way. They'll see a rich man getting involved with a housekeeper from Skid Row. They'll say she's a gold digger, that she's after your money. They'll destroy her. And do you really want that?" Richard fell back into his chair, his head in his hands. "No, I don't want anyone to hurt her. But I also can't pretend I don't feel what I feel." "Then you need to make a decision. A real decision. You can't stay in this in-between place. Either you treat her like a housekeeper and keep your distance, or you publicly acknowledge that she means something to you and face the consequences. But you can't stay in this place of uncertainty, because it's that place that hurts the most. Richard knew Abigail was right, and that's why, that same night, he called Sophia to his Carrara marble office. She came up at 8 o'clock, after she finished her work for the day, entered the office in her navy uniform stained with bleach, her hands still smelling of cleaning products, her expression showing she didn't know what to expect. Richard was standing in front of the window, looking at the garden, lit by the exterior lights. He turned when she entered. "Sit down, please." Sophia sat down. Richard took a deep breath. "We need to talk about us, about what's happening, about what it means." Sophia just waited. Richard continued, "I've spent a month trying to deny it, trying to rationalize it, trying to convince myself it was crazy, coincidence, stress. But it's not. The necklace, the document, the visions, the old Castilian Spanish. It all proves that you and I have a connection that spans 800 years, and I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore." "Sophia, where is this going? Here's where it gets complicated." Richard ran a hand through his hair. "Because I want you. I want to be with you. I want to protect you. I want to protect Lily. I want you both to never struggle again. But the world won't understand. They'll say you're a gold digger. They'll say you're with me for the money. They'll destroy your reputation, and I don't want that. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to make a choice. Either I keep you as a housekeeper and pretend I don't feel anything, or I acknowledge you publicly and face the consequences. But I can't stay in this in-between place, because it's hurting you, hurting me, hurting what we have." Sophia was silent for a long moment, and then she said the bravest and most painful thing she had ever said in her life. "Then give me the check." "What?" "The $50,000 check that you offered for me to leave. Give it to me, and I'll go. I'll leave your life, I'll go back to my reality. You go back to yours, and we'll pretend none of this ever happened. That 1225 was just a shared dream, that the necklace was a coincidence, that we didn't feel anything, because maybe it's easier that way. Maybe it's better to live with longing for 800 years ago than to try to make this work in a world that will never accept it." And it was at that moment, that Friday at 8:30 in the evening, that we reached the point where we began. Richard extends the $50,000 check. Sophia tears it in half. Pieces fall. Vision explodes. Medieval town square. Promise. Love stronger than death. And both finally understand that there is no choice to make, because souls that have sought each other through 800 years don't give up at the first difficulty of the modern world. When the vision passes, Richard is on his knees on the floor of the Carrara marble office, Sophia beside him, both crying, and he whispers in a broken voice, "I don't want your money, Richard." Sophia repeats the words that triggered the vision. "I want you. To the man who died for me, to the man whose soul I recognize, to the man who spent 800 years looking for me without knowing he was looking. That man I want. And if the world doesn't accept it, then the world can go to hell. Because I spent 67 days dying for you in 1225. And I'm not going to spend another 800 years running away from you now." Richard hugs her. And there, in the office where it all began, where their eyes recognized each other for the first time in this life. He whispers against her hair, "Marry me." Sophia pulls back, her eyes wide. What? Marry me? Not in a year. Not in 6 months. Now. Tomorrow. Next week. As fast as the law allows. Because if we're going to face the world, we're going to face it together. As husband and wife. As soulmates who have finally stopped running from destiny. Richard, you're crazy. I am crazy about you. Crazy enough to throw away everything that society says I should do. Crazy enough to marry a maid and face all the judgment. Because the alternative is living without you, and I've already done that. For 800 years, I won't do it again. And Sophia, the woman who refused money, who refused the apartment, who refused everything he offered, finally says yes to the only thing that matters. Yes. I'll marry you, because in 1225, we had no choice. The world tore us apart, but in 2025, we choose. We choose to be together. We choose to fight. We choose love above social class, above judgment, above everything that should separate us. They kiss. And this time, there's no vision, no flashback. There's just the present. There are just two human beings who finally stopped fighting the impossible and accepted that some connections are too strong to be denied, even if it takes 800 years to materialize. If you're not feeling chills right now, if something inside you isn't screaming, "Yes, this is real love," comment down below, because you've just witnessed something that happens maybe once in 1,000 lifetimes. Two souls, separated by time, death, and circumstance, finally saying no to everything that should tear them apart, and yes to the only thing that matters, because what Richard and Sophia just decided is going to change everything. And what's about to happen will prove that not even 800 years are enough to erase love when it's real. The wedding happened 3 weeks later. It wasn't in the luxurious church that the Sterling family had attended for generations. It wasn't in a 5-star hotel with a guest list of 300 people. It was in the town square of Toledo, Ohio, in the same town square where, 800 years before, Roderick Sterling had been executed for loving a woman who was above his social class. Richard bought tickets to Ohio for Sophia, for Lily, for Mrs. Rodriguez, who had taken care of Lily so many times. Just 4 people, no luxury, no ostentation, just the necessary witnesses, and the weight of 800 years of history. They arrived in Toledo on a rainy Thursday in October. The town square still existed, preserved as a historical monument. Tourists were taking pictures. Children were running between the ancient stones. No one knew, no one could imagine that here, in this exact place, in 1225, a man had died for love, and that in 2025, this same man was about to finally marry the woman he had promised to find in every lifetime. But before the wedding, Richard had one last thing he needed to show Sophia. On Friday morning, he took her to the Toledo Municipal Museum. An old building converted, medieval stone walls, the smell of history and dust. The curator was waiting for them, a 70-year-old man named Walter, who had worked with Richard during the research of the documents. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Rossi, I managed to prepare what you asked for, but I must warn you, what you are about to see is disturbing, not to say impossible." He led them to a room in the back, maximum restriction, only for researchers. And there, on a table covered with black velvet, was a glass case. Inside it, A parchment with a medieval illustration, faded ink, paper yellowed by centuries, but the image was still clear. It was a portrait, drawn by a medieval artist in 1225, two faces, a man and a woman, and below, in ancient Latin, the inscription, Roderick Sterling et Beatriz de Mendoza, Amor prohibido, amor eterno, forbidden love, eternal love. Sophia looked at the drawing and began to tremble, because the faces on the medieval parchment, the faces drawn 800 years ago, were theirs. They were exactly Richard and Sophia. They weren't similar, they weren't alike, they were identical, as if the medieval artist had traveled through time, seen them in 2025, and portrayed those same faces in 1225. How is this possible? Sophia whispered, her legs weak. How could someone in 1225 draw exactly our features, our eyes, our faces? The curator, Walter, adjusted his glasses. That's the question. That has no scientific answer. I've worked with historical documents for 45 years. I've seen thousands of medieval portraits, and I can state with absolute certainty that this drawing is not an approximation. It's not artistic stylization. It's a precise photographic portrait, as if the artist had seen you both personally. And considering that you were born 800 years later, that's scientifically impossible. But here's the proof, impossible and real at the same time. Richard held Sophia's hand, both of them looking at the parchment, at the medieval versions of themselves. And then Richard noticed something that made him stop breathing. In the drawing, Roderick was wearing chains on his wrists, and on the chain, engraved with minute but visible details, was the same text that they had found on the real chain. Roderick Sterling, traitor, 1225, and Beatrice, in the drawing, had something on her wrist, a mark, a shadow, exactly where Sophia had the birthmark, exactly in the shape of a chain. The artist saw everything, Richard whispered, saw the execution, saw the chains, saw the mark that the chain would leave, and he drew it, not just as a historical record, but as a prophecy, as if he knew that 800 years later, we would both be here, looking at this, and finally understanding that some connections transcend time, death, and all the laws we think govern reality. Walter left them alone in the room. Richard and Sophia stayed there for an hour, just looking, processing, and finally accepting that there was no more denying. There was no more room for doubt. This was all real, more real than reality itself. This story shouldn't exist, Sophia's voice broke the silence. It should be madness. It should be an impossible coincidence. But it's all here. The chain, the document, the portrait, everything proving that in 1225, Roderick and Beatrice loved each other so much that death wasn't able to separate them, and that in 2025, Richard and Sophia are the continuation of that unfinished story. If you're feeling that stories like this deserve to be supported, that truths like this need to be told, even if they defy everything we think we know, leave a super thanks, because what comes now is the resolution that Roderick and Beatrice never had, and that Richard and Sophia are finally going to achieve. On Saturday, October 28th, under the gray sky of Toledo, Ohio, Richard Sterling and Sophia Rossi got married. The Spanish civil registrar performed the ceremony. Mrs. Rodriguez cried. Lily wore a simple white dress that Sophia had sewn. And when it came time for the vows, Richard did something that no one expected. He pulled two papers out of his pocket, one for him, one for Sophia, and he began to read. not in Portuguese, not in modern Spanish, but in Old Castilian, the language of 1225. Beatriz de Mendoza, te busqué por 800 años, a través de siglos, a través de vidas, a través de la muerte misma. Beatriz de Mendoza, I searched for you for 800 years, through centuries, through lives, through death itself, and I found you, not as a duchess and a merchant, but as a man and a woman, equal to equal. And I promise you, in this life, and in all the lives to come, we will never be apart again. Never again will the world decide for us. Never again will social class, or money, or power come between our souls, because what we have transcends all of that. What we have is eternal. Sophia picked up her paper, her hands trembling, tears falling, and she responded in the same impossible language. Richard Sterling, I died for you 800 years ago. I refused to live without you, and I kept my promise. I found you, and now I promise you, in this life, I will live, I will love you, not in death, but in life. I will build with you everything that was denied to us. And if 1,000 more lives come after this one, in each one, I will find you, because you are my soulmate, today, 800 years ago, and for all eternity. The civil registry official didn't understand ancient Spanish, but it didn't matter, because those vows weren't for him. They were for time. They were for destiny. They were for the souls that had waited 8 centuries for that moment. When the official declared them husband and wife, when Richard kissed Sophia in that town square, where it all had begun and ended so many centuries ago, something happened. It wasn't a vision this time. It wasn't a flashback. It was a sensation of peace so profound that both felt as if a weight of 800 years had finally been lifted from their shoulders, as if 2 souls that had carried pain through lifetimes could finally rest, could simply be. Lily, watching from the side, whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez, "See, Mrs. Rodriguez, he's not sad anymore. The sad man has finally found what he was looking for." And Mrs. Rodriguez, who knew nothing about 1225, nothing about Rodrigo and Beatriz, nothing about reincarnation or soulmates, just smiled with tears in her eyes. Because you didn't need to know the whole story to feel the truth. Some connections are so powerful that anyone can feel them, even without understanding. They stayed in Toledo for a week. They walked through the medieval streets. They visited the castle where Beatrice had been taken after the execution. They went to the church where she had been forced to marry the Duke, and in each place, instead of pain, they felt closure of a story that had been left open for too long, closure of wounds that had bled through centuries, closure that allowed, finally, a true beginning. On the last day, before returning to Chicago, Sophia asked to visit the town square one more time. It was dawn, 5 o'clock in the morning, no one there but them. The ancient stones cold beneath their feet, the autumn wind carrying the scent of history and time. Sophia stood in the exact center where the execution had happened, Richard beside her. And she whispered, "Richard, can you hear me? Wherever your soul is, in whatever dimension exists beyond this life, I want you to know, you didn't die in vain. You died for love, and that love was so strong that it survived death, survived 800 years, and now, finally, it has won. You can rest. You can have peace, because I kept the promise. I found you. And this time, no one will separate us. Richard embraced her from behind and whispered too, Sophia, wherever you are, you didn't need to have died, didn't need to have refused to eat. But I understand why you did. Because a world without the person you love is not a world worth living in. And I promise you, I promise that in this life, I will live enough for both of us. I will love enough to compensate for 800 years of separation. And I will ensure that Sophia, this version of you that found me again, never again has to choose between love and life, because she will have both for all of this life, as long as I breathe. They stayed embraced until the sun rose, and when the first golden light of dawn touched the medieval town square of Toledo, both felt it, a presence, not threatening, not frightening, but comforting, as if two ancient souls could finally rest, as if Richard and Sophia of 1225 could finally depart in peace. Because Richard and Sophia of 2025 were finally together, and the story that had been brutally interrupted by a sword could finally have the happy ending it always deserved. They returned to Chicago as husband and wife. Richard sold the mansion, that huge, empty house that had always been a luxurious, lifeless mausoleum. They bought a smaller house, simpler, in a middle-class neighborhood, not Skid Row, but also not obscene ostentation, a place where Sophia could raise Lily with dignity, where Richard could finally live, instead of just accumulate, where the three could be a real family. The Sterling family was scandalized. The business partners were confused. Chicago society commented for months. The billionaire who married the housekeeper, who sold the mansion, who changed his life completely. Some said he had gone mad. Others said it was a midlife crisis. Still others said the woman had bewitched him. But Richard no longer cared what they said, because for the first time in 38 years, he woke up in the morning and felt something besides emptiness. He woke up and saw Sophia beside him, saw Lily running around the house, saw real life happening, instead of a mechanical existence of wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And that was worth more than all the mansions, all the cars, all the opinions of the society he had spent his entire life trying to impress. Sophia continued working, not as a housekeeper, but she opened a small tailoring workshop. The clothes she made with her own hands, the same calloused hands that had cleaned mansion bathrooms, now created unique pieces that women paid well to wear, not out of pity, not out of charity, but because she had real talent that she had never had a chance to develop when she was struggling just to survive. And Lily. Lily grew up at home with love. She went to private school, yes, because Richard insisted, but she never forgot where she came from. She never lost her humility. And when she turned 5, at a modest birthday party in the new house, she blew out the candles on the cake and whispered a wish that no one but Sophia heard. Thank you for finally bringing her, the mommy I had before. Sophia froze. She looked at her daughter. Lily, what did you say? Lily smiled, that child smile that knows things she shouldn't know. I remember, Mommy. I remember when you were a queen, and I was your daughter. But you died sad because he died first, and I was left alone. But now it's all right, because now I have you both. And no one is sad anymore. Sophia began to cry. Richard, who was beside her, heard everything. And for the first time, he understood. Lily wasn't just Sophia's daughter in this life. She was the daughter Beatrice would have had if she had lived after marrying the Duke. She was the daughter she refused to have because it wasn't with Roderick. She was the soul, also connected to this 800-year-old story, who had also waited, who had also returned, so that finally, in 2025, all three souls could be together. Roderick, Beatrice, and the daughter they never had in 1225, but finally had now. And then, everything made sense. Why Lily had always seen Richard before meeting him. Why she called him the sad man who waits. Why she wasn't surprised when a billionaire suddenly entered their lives. Because her soul also remembered, also recognized, also knew that this wasn't a beginning. It was a family reunion, separated by 800 years, and finally reunited. 3 years passed. Richard was 41, Sophia 31, Lily 8. They were visiting Toledo again, an annual trip. They had turned into a tradition. Every time they returned to the town square, every time they gave thanks, every time they felt the presence of those two ancient souls who had finally found peace. And it was on this third visit that the curator, Fernando, approached them at the hotel. He had something important to show them. They returned to the museum, and there, on the same black velvet table, was something new, another parchment. We found this last week in a private family archive of a noble family, dated 1226. A year after Beatrice's death. Richard picked up the parchment, his hands trembling. Oh, it was a letter written by a 12-year-old girl, the daughter the Duke had with Beatrice before she died. A daughter Beatrice had refused to love because she wasn't Roderick's daughter. And the letter said, "My mother died without looking at me. She died whispering the name of another man, Roderick, and I wonder if she had had a daughter with that man. And with that true love, what would that girl be like? Would she be loved? Would she be wanted? Would she be happy? I hope so. I hope that somewhere, sometime, my mother finds that man again, and that they have the daughter they should have had, and that this time, they are happy." All three of them. Richard and Sophia read the letter, embraced, tears streaming down their faces, because that girl from 1226 had wished for exactly what had happened in 2025, had wished for Beatrice and Roderick to meet again, to have the daughter they could never have, that they would be happy. And 800 years later, that wish had come true, as if the universe itself had heard the prayer of a motherless girl and decided to grant it. Lily, who was with them at the museum, looked at the ancient letter, and with that impossible wisdom that children sometimes have, she said, "That girl was also me, in another life, waiting for you two to finally be together, waiting to have the family I never had back then. And now I have. So it's all right. Everything as it should be." And then, in that dusty museum in Toledo, surrounded by 800-year-old documents, the family that had been separated by death, by time, and by 8 centuries of waiting, was finally complete. Roderick had become Richard. Beatrice had become Sophia. The daughter who was never born had become Lily. And together, they were living the happy ending that 1225 never allowed. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever met someone and felt that that person carries something of yours that was lost a long time ago? Have you ever looked into a child's eyes and felt that that soul is ancient, wise, as if it had lived before? If so, perhaps you are also part of a story that spans lifetimes. Perhaps you also have promises to fulfill, connections to reunite, souls to gather. And if this story has touched you in a way you can't explain, comment below. Tell us what inexplicable connection you have felt, because perhaps your comment will help someone else understand that they are not crazy, that these things exist, that true love can truly transcend time, death, and all the barriers that the world puts up. Richard Sterling and Sophia Rossi live to this day in Chicago. He still works with hotels, but now invests in affordable hotels for low-income families. She has a successful fashion design studio. Lily is in school. She is an excellent student. She wants to be a historian when she grows up, specializing in the medieval period of Castile. And every time someone asks her why, she smiles and says, "Because I need to tell stories that people have forgotten. Stories of love that have spanned centuries. Stories that prove that not even 800 years are enough to separate souls that belong to each other." The medieval chain from 1225 is in a frame in the living room of their house, next to the portrait that Richard commissioned of the family, him, Sophia, and Lily. And when you look at the two paintings side by side, the ancient chain and the modern portrait, you can see it, you can feel it. The connection that transcends time, the love that defies death, the promise that finally, after 800 years, was fulfilled. Because in the end, what matters isn't how much money you have. It's not what social class you were born into. It's not what society says you should do or be or love. What matters are the souls that recognize your soul. The people who make you feel like you've finally arrived home after wandering lost for entire lifetimes. The connections that are so strong that not even 800 years can erase. And when you find that, when you finally find your soulmate, in whatever life it is, you don't let go. You fight. You choose. You say no to everything that should separate you, and yes to the only thing that matters. Richard extended a check for $50,000. Sophia tore it up. And with that simple gesture, with those two pieces of paper falling to the floor, they chose 800 years of love, above all the logical reasons to give up. They chose the connection of the soul, above social class. They chose the impossible, and the impossible, as always happens when it comes to true love, found a way. Some connections transcend time. Some promises take centuries to fulfill. But when they finally are,